Bills schedule release special. I'm Maddy Glab, and I'm joined by Bills insider Chris Brown. We finally know the 2023 Buffalo Bills schedule, and whew, it is a beauty. Chris, to sum up what you're seeing right now, what's a phrase or a couple of words you would use to describe this schedule in its entirety?
Yeah, I kind of like a healthy challenge. I mean, we knew the Bills had the seventh toughest schedule in terms of strength of schedule, opponent winning percentage from last year. It's a readily apparent in this lineup of opponents. 10 playoff teams from last year, including the two teams that met in the Super Bowl. But I think all things considered, it lines up fairly well.
I really like how it lines up. My couple of words phrase, death to the 1 o'clock games. Goodbye. We are now a 4:25 team. The Bills only have 5 1 o'clock games this season, and in the final 10 weeks of the season, there's a chance they only have one 1 p.m. game. They're going to be on a national stage from the 8 o'clock kicks to the 4:25 kicks. There's going to be a whole lot of eyes on this team this season beyond Bills fans that already watch them every single Sunday. I really like the opportunity they have to be on that national stage this year, and it's only really ramped up for this team year after year. You wonder a little bit, are they going to be an under-the-radar team this year in the way it's reflected on the schedule? Not at all.
Yeah, I don't think so. That's not happening. You said it, 5 1 p.m. games only. And, you know, you've got 5 primetime games, and that speaks for itself. But as you mentioned, the 4 o'clock window games are also pretty big, as we'll get to in a second.
Instant reaction to the Buffalo Bills 2023 schedule is presented by Ellicott Development and Aloft at 500 Pearl. Tune in right now to NFL Network for complete coverage of the NFL regular season schedule. So let's talk opener here. Let's get going with that. The Bills will open their season with a contest against the New York Jets. It's going to be some Monday Night Football at MetLife on September 11th, a really big date there. September 11th in New York. That means a lot. Aaron Rodgers against Josh Allen, 2 top 5 defenses from last season going at it. A team that pushed all their chips to the middle and said, we are all in, versus a team who's built up to being a Super Bowl contender over the last several years who want to make it last. It's the start of a full season battle for that AFC East crown. So do you think there's a better way to start off the season here for the Bills?
Well, I mean, it's certainly a measuring stick game for the Jets. How far and how much have they closed the gap on the Bills, the 3-time division champions, by adding Aaron Rodgers along with some other pieces, including offensive coordinator Nate Hackett, who is new as well and has spent time, as we know, with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. But even more than the talent that's going to be on the field, I'm almost more concerned about the atmosphere in MetLife Stadium with all the anticipation for Jets fans this season. With Aaron Rodgers now on board, it's going to be off the chain. It's a gigantic early measuring stick game, as I said. And then you talk about the pomp and circumstance that we know is going to take place in the pregame ceremony with the 22nd anniversary of 9/11 happening just 15 miles away from that stadium on the other side of the Hudson River. I think it's going to benefit the Bills to get off to a good start in that football game, kind of hopefully take the crowd out of it, because if they can't do that early, it's going to be difficult for that offense to operate with as loud as that building can get when they, as a fan base, believe their team is going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, these two teams split the regular season last year, and it was a tough sledding for the Bills. Anytime they face the Jets, they're going to have 2 times, at least in the regular season, against this team as well. And I love getting it the first week because you do have that extra hype. You'll have it from the Bills fans as well, and hopefully they pack that stadium. And hopefully you're getting 2 teams who are healthy. The question is Von Miller going to be ready in week 1? That's going to be a really big storyline leading up to this game. You want a game like this where you're going to get the best of both teams, especially to kick off the NFL season on Monday Night Football, to kick off the Bills season. I mean, the Jets were 7-10 last year, and they have a chance to make a run here. So it's 2 interesting teams going up against each other, and they've had an incredible last few years in the NFL draft, and here it is. This is the Jets' time. Can the Bills continue to be that leader in the AFC East that they have been in the last few years?
Yeah, and you mentioned Von Miller and what his availability might be in week 1. The Jets, by the same token, are wondering if they're going to have Breece Hall at full strength. A guy that was really taking the league by storm as a rookie last year, second-round pick in the 2022 draft, tears his ACL a week or two before the Bills play them for the first time last year. They haven't seen Breece Hall on the field as a New York Jet. And does that happen in week one for New York? So, yeah, availability of some key players is going to factor into this thing as well.
Most definitely. Let's get into the home opener. Buffalo has their home opener on week 2 and will host the Las Vegas Raiders for a good old 1 o'clock kick. Not too many of those on the schedule, as we said. This weather should also be elite as well. September 17th, 1 o'clock. I love it. The Raiders have a new quarterback in Jimmy G. They drafted an edge rusher in Tyree Wilson with their 7th overall pick. Their defensive line is looking pretty mean. So how do you like this 1 o'clock home opener against a team like the Raiders?
Well, as you said, from an atmosphere perspective, it is elite season in Buffalo. Western New York, September, 1 p.m. home game. That's the way it should be for Bills, and Bills fans would say the same. So I expect picture-perfect conditions. Can we have a sunny day, please? And, I think the Raiders knew they had to do a lot of work on their defense. Their defense could not stop anybody last year. They decided to start up front. So they're going to pair Tyree Wilson, the first-round pick, with Max Crosby, the Pro Bowl pass rusher, on the other side. So that's going to be a monumental task for Buffalo's offensive line in that game. I think as long as they can stand in there and protect effectively, the Bills should get their home schedule off to a good start.
I think it's an interesting matchup here because you've got a team in the Bills who have solidified who they are going up against a team in the Raiders who still have a lot of things to figure out. There's some newness there. There is the connection with Josh McDaniels and Jimmy G, but with all the newness, you wonder if week 2 is going to be really soon for a team like the Raiders to put it together with the new draft additions. I mean, they drafted a tight end in Michael Mayer as well.
Yep.
He's going to be an addition to that team without Darren Waller. So I like the first home game there for the Bills. Moving into primetime and holiday games, because this is something you also look at when you look at this schedule, because the Bills have been a holiday team and a primetime team as of the last few years. They've had a few Thanksgiving games. 3 out of the last 4 years they've played on Thanksgiving. It won't be 4 out of the last 5 because the Bills will have this Thanksgiving off. No Christmas Eve or no Christmas Day game for the Bills here. Why do you think they're sitting the year out for the holiday games? Because there were quite a few opportunities for any team, especially a team like the Bills, to be on that holiday stage. Black Friday game this year.
Yeah.
You've got Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, but the Bills will not be a part of any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they don't want to keep going to the same well, and so they'll probably pick some other players since we know that, the Bills aren't playing on Thanksgiving or on Christmas Day. Selfishly, I'm a little happy from a traveling perspective and from a family perspective.
Hang out with your family.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a good thing, because the Thanksgiving games have been on the road. So, yeah, it's tricky. And not for nothing, we didn't get home until 4 in the afternoon on Christmas Day because of the terrible snowstorm we had here in Buffalo last year. So taking a break from that is fine. And just talking to our fans on our daily show, One Bills Live, Maddie, they don't want the Thanksgiving game either because of the horrible injuries that have happened the last 2 years. You lost Trey White and Von Miller to ACL injuries each of the last 2 years on Thanksgiving Day games. So even though the Bills got the win, the player losses were felt for a much longer time than the win was because they were long-term rehabilitations from ACL knee surgery.
So even though they won't be playing on any holidays, this team will have plenty of primetime games. They've got the same amount of primetime games as they do 1 p.m. games. That magic number is 5 as of right now. But remember, games at the end of the season can get flexed, and the Week 18 game for the Bills is to be determined right now. So we already talked about that Week 1 game for the Bills Monday Night Football against the Jets. So let's get into the other ones. It's Week 6, October 15th against the New York Giants on Sunday Night Football. Then Week 8, October 26th against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's Thursday Night Football on Prime Video. And then you've got Week 9, November 5th against the Cincinnati Bengals, 8:20 Sunday Night Football. And then Week 10, November 13th against the Denver Broncos. That's going to be Monday Night Football. So as we look at the way that this is placed, the fact that they're going to have to go 3 straight weeks of primetime games from a Thursday night to a Sunday night to a Monday night there, the Bills will be on anything but a schedule during this stretch, but maybe that's a good thing to kind of have that schedule of those primetime games all meshed into each other, all in that 3-game stretch. What's your initial reaction to these primetime matchups? And then we'll dive into a couple a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, they can get used to playing at night because they're doing it for about a month. So, yeah, maybe you get used to playing in the 8 o'clock hour in the evening because of the way this schedule lays out. You know, we'll hear from Mike North a little later on in the program about whether this was an anomaly or some other reason as to why this thing got lined up this way with so many prime times consecutively. But I don't think it's a problem. The Bills are used to playing primetime games. They played in 5 last year, which was a franchise high. They've got another 5 this year to tie that mark. But yeah, I don't think for a team that has as much continuity as the Bills, who've been in the nationally televised game window before, I don't think it's a big deal.
After week 10, I thought this was interesting. Really, after week 10, there are no primetime games on the schedule for the Bills. You do have those 425 games, which we'll get into as well. That could change, but I thought that was interesting, front-loaded there for the 8 o'clock games and beyond. All right, let's talk about this Giants Sunday Night Football game on October 15th, week 6, a little more. So that'll be coming off of that London game. This game is subject to change. There's a couple of Sunday night games that could get changed this year, Sunday night and Monday night games, just depending on where teams are at. That's something kind of new to the NFL this year. They've been able to change some of that up as the season goes on. So first game against the Giants with Brian Daboll as their head coach. A lot of former Bills on this team as well. They had a good top half of the draft. Can they take the next step and become a consistent playoff team? How do you like this matchup here for the Bills?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because while the Giants, I think, exceeded expectations last year in year 1 under Brian Daboll and made the playoffs, they had an inordinate number of one-score victories. And any analytics expert will tell you that in the following year, that number usually regresses back to the mean. So if they're in a lot of close games again, maybe they don't come out with quite as many as they did last year. All that being said, you know NBC is going to be playing it up. Brian Daboll not only coming back to the team, you know, where he kind of grew Josh Allen into the super phenom quarterback he was, but from a personal level, Brian Daboll is coming back to the town where he grew up, for the town that he rooted for the first time as a head coach in this league. And I think that carries a lot of weight with Brian, knowing his affinity for Western New York. So that's a storyline to really kind of keep an eye on, and you know NBC will play up to the hilt.
The Giants were 9-7 last year, 3rd in the NFC East. We know they made a playoff run, so can they do that again this season? And then let's also talk about that Bengals game a little bit. Week 9, November 5th, that's going to be another Sunday night football matchup, a rematch from the divisional round last year. The Bills lost by 17 points in that game. They lost to the Chiefs. The Bengals did in the conference championship. They were 12-4 last season. The Bengals' first 3 picks of the draft were on defense, so they've added to that defense through the NFL draft. They also go ahead and add left tackle Orlando Brown through free agency in the offseason. I like where this game is placed in the middle of the season here. You're going to get the best of both teams. You know, it sometimes takes 6 weeks to get a team really going. These teams are, I would say, looked at more as veterans. They've had guys on this team for several years. Both teams mesh with their core group of individuals that they have that are their star players. Hopefully, the health is on the Bills' side in this game. It wasn't in the playoffs. The Bills get this game coming off of a Thursday night football matchup, so they'll have a long week to prepare for the Bengals. What else can you say about this big matchup in Week 9?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see what that Bengals defense looks like this year because of the turnover that you mentioned. I mean, they lost both of their starting safeties in Von Bell and Jesse Bates. Are the 2 replacements going to be sufficient and the same? Because those guys covered up a lot of mistakes on the back end for Cincinnati, and now those 2 guys who are a veteran presence for them are gone. Now, you would think by November they'll have things lined up and figured out for Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator. But I also think that this Cincinnati game is going to be all about going back to the scene where, unfortunately, the Damar Hamlin
Yeah.
incident happened. The media will be playing that up. The television network will be playing that up. I'm glad this game is after midseason, knowing those feelings
That's a good point.
have some time to fade.
Yes.
Before they had to go there week 1 or week 2.
It's still
I'd be
new.
a little concerned that the feelings were still very fresh there. So I'm glad there's some time.
Okay, aside from the primetime games, I think this is an interesting chunk of the schedule here. So you've got the 3 straight primetime games, and then you have 4 straight 4:25 games that are separated by a bye week. The 4 straight 4 o'clock games come right after those primetime games, as I said, and the Bills will not have a 1 o'clock game for at least 7 straight weeks. So
Yeah.
you're getting into the meat and potatoes of the schedule here. Some of these 4:25 games are really big games for this team. You've got the Jets in week 11, you've got the Eagles in week 12, Chiefs in week 14, and Cowboys then in week 15. So as you kind of digest where these 4:25 games are, Chris, how do you think about where they're placed and the teams that they will be playing against at this point in the schedule?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that they all come consecutively, number one. I think it also speaks to how much the Bills are in demand for prime slots in the late afternoon window. Those late afternoon 4 o'clock games usually draw even more viewers than the primetime games. They are prime real estate for the television network. So to see the Bills in 4 of them from week 11 to week 15 with a bye sandwiched in the middle, it's the most 4:25 kickoffs in a season for the Bills since 2009, when they, for some reason, had 5, and all of them coming in a 6-week span. So this is unusual territory, but I do think it speaks to the contending status that the Bills are held in regard-wise for the networks. They want them in that window. They know they are must-see TV.
I like that they get the Eagles right before the bye, and then they get the Chiefs coming out of the bye. I like that placement
long
there.
rest.
Interesting, though, this is toward the end of the regular season. You need that rest there, so I'm glad the bye week is there, but you wonder how a team is going to be health-wise at this point in the season. Last year for the Bills, it wasn't in their favor at this point in the season. They were having to use a lot of the depth on that roster by the time you got into the week 12s and the week 14. So hopefully the Bills will kind of be able to flip the script on their health this season. They surely got a couple years worth of bad health in one season. So hopefully it won't be the case this year for the team. So let's continue the conversation about these primetime and 4:25 games for the Bills and really why they were slated where they were. And for more on that, let's hear from the NFL Vice President and schedule creator, Mike North.
All right, Mike, 5 primetime games for the Bills, matching a franchise high of last season, including week 1 at the Jets on Monday night. Question to you, though, is how in demand are the Bills when it comes to your network partners? Because I know it's a little more wide open now as far as, requesting teams per se.
Yeah, look, they're top tier. No two ways around it. I mean, there's Dallas and there's Kansas City, which, at least for now, have sort of separated themselves from everybody else just in terms of, that must-see TV, top of the food chain type of ratings opportunity. But when you talk about that next tier right underneath Dallas and Kansas City, you're talking about Buffalo, you're talking about Cincinnati, you're talking about Philadelphia, you're talking about San Fran. The Bills are right there. It wasn't that long ago. I know you remember when everybody was getting real comfortable Sunday at 1 o'clock and we didn't want home games in December because we weren't sure the fans would show up. Those days are thankfully, hopefully, in the past. And every network partner walks in with the Buffalo Bills at or near the top of their list of requests.
4 of the Bills' 5 primetime games happen in a 5-week stretch between week 6 and 10. Is that just an anomaly, or is that to help your network partners out during November sweeps? What's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, a bit of an anomaly. I think the way I understand how you and everybody else looks at it in terms of, just the primetime games, the Sunday nights, the Thursday nights, the Monday nights. But don't forget, we're also looking at the Sunday afternoons, the 4:25s. Those big national windows on CBS and Fox, those are actually the windows that get the most viewership. So you're talking 25, 28 million people on a Sunday afternoon. So as we look at the Bills schedule, yeah, there's a run of primetime games, but look at what happens after those primetime games.
Yeah.
Doubleheader week 11, doubleheader week 12, doubleheader week 14, doubleheader week 15. To us, those are primetime games as well. So the real way to look at the Bills schedule is what? 3, 4, 5 Sunday 1 o'clock games. Everything else is in a national television window.
Yeah, and we saw that last year a couple of times. This year, as you mentioned, it's 425 window games in a 5-week span as well. It comes right after that primetime stretch. You know, you get into that final third of the season. Does this speak to where you think the AFC conference race is going in light of some of the matchups that you have in those 425 windows?
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, none of us know anything. It's May. We'll see what happens when December finally rolls around. But Buffalo, Cincinnati, Kansas City sure seem to be the elite teams in that conference. And the fact that they play each other and they play Philadelphia and Dallas and in the other side, I mean, it's a lot of must-see TV for those teams. And whether you find yourself in prime time or at 4:25 in the afternoon on Sunday afternoon, those are big national windows where our fans are going to be able to watch this sort of run to the playoffs. And yeah, we've got every expectation and frankly hope that the Bills are going to be right there at the end.
And the last one real quick, Mike, they have the TBD game in Week 18, Bills at Miami. We understand why it's TBD because you guys have some decisions to make based on division races, conference races, et cetera, right?
Yep, you got it. All of Week 18 is TBD. Literally every game in Week 18, all 16 divisional games, 14 straight years now of finishing the season with all divisional games, and it's worked out really well. There's always games that matter. There always seems to be a win and in for a division or a wild card spot, and maybe even more importantly, you might be out of it, but you're playing somebody who's got everything left to play for, and you're not laying down against a division opponent. So nothing better than ruining their season if your season's already gotten away from you. And we've seen that over and over again,
Yeah.
whether it was Detroit Green Bay last year or Indy Jacks the year before. So those division games, they hit harder, they mean something. So literally every one of those games in Week 18 is TBD, and we'll figure out the right sequencing of them between Saturday at 4:30, Saturday at 8, Sunday at 1, 4:30, and 8, and hopefully have a really good story to tell as we solidify the playoff spots in the final weekend of the season.
Mike, thanks as always for the time. We appreciate the insight on the formulation of the schedule.
You got it. Take care.
All right, thanks, Mike. It's the race to first place in the AFC East this season. It's going to be no joke. The Bills have owned the division the last 3 years, but can they do it a fourth year? So let's talk about these division games and how they're spread out throughout the season. They got Week 1 against the Jets, Week 4 against Miami, Week 7 at the Patriots, Week 11 home against the Jets, that's a 4:25 game, Week 17 hosting the Patriots, Week 18 at Miami. 2 back-to-back division games to end the season. Another interesting thing about this is the Bills are hosting Miami in October, possibly some good weather there in Buffalo, and playing in Miami in January. No need to worry about the snow there in January to end the regular season. Remember, weather was a huge factor in that Miami game at the end of September last year. So are there any weeks that jump out to you, Chris, with the way that the division games are spread out?
Yeah, well, I do like the fact that the division games are spread out. You remember last season they had 3 consecutive division games in the back half of the schedule. So I kind of like that they're spread out a little bit, where you're not just in the meat grinder all season long with games that count 1.5 to double as far as your playoff fortunes are concerned. I think the Miami game in Week 18 is the one that jumps out because it could have giant implications for playoff seeding and possibly the division title. So a lot could be on the line for that game. That's why it sticks out to me.
Yeah, I would say I stare at that Week 1 and Week 18 game. You've got a tone setter to start the year, and then you've got a tone setter to go into the playoffs, hopefully. Playoff implications could very much be a thing in Week 18. And with the Dolphins, they add Vic Fangio to their defensive staff as the defensive coordinator and add Jalen Ramsey to that defense. Can Tua stay healthy? A lot of factors there for the Dolphins. They're not going to be an easy matchup for this team. Again, it was tough sledding against the Dolphins, just like it was for the Jets. Let's talk big picture schedule lay out overall and digest this full schedule now that we've talked about some important sections already. First, let's discuss the bye week, though. The Bills have a late bye week this year. Week 13 is their bye, and the following week is a game against the Chiefs. Remember, they had the option to take their bye week after the London game, but decided to not do so. Do you like where the bye is placed in this schedule,
Yeah,
Chris?
I do like it. I think any coach or player will tell you a bye week is better for their team later in the year than it is earlier in the year, and this is the latest bye week ever for the Bills. It matches the latest they've ever had a bye week. The last time they had a bye week in Week 13 was all the way back in 1999. Wow. But knowing how beat up bodies are late in the season, I think the benefits of getting a week to heal in Week 13 is much more valuable than, say, in Week 6 or 7.
Yeah, last year their bye was in Week 7, and that's an early bye week to have. I love that this comes near the end of the regular season, heading into a game against the Chiefs, coming out of a game against the Eagles. I think this is perfect placement. The schedule creators, in my opinion, killed it there with the bye week at Week 13. Would you ID a toughest stretch in the schedule here? Do you think there's a stretch of 3 or 4 games that are really going to be a gauntlet for this team?
Yeah, the gauntlet's kind of like Week 11 to Week 16.
Yep.
Jets at home, at Philly, a bye, and then at Kansas City, home against Dallas, and at the Chargers. That's a challenging stretch, to say the least. 4 playoff teams from last year, including the 2 conference champions. That's a tough row to hoe.
Yep, that's what I had as well as their toughest stretch. I like that there's a bye week in there, and then Week 14, really Week 15, Week 16, you got the Cowboys and then the Chargers. It'll be interesting to see what teams the Cowboys and the Chargers are by the time you get them in Week 15 and Week 16. These could be really great playoff contending teams, or they could be a little bit injured and not what people thought they would be. Let's look at road stretches, home stretches. They have 7 home games before Thanksgiving. They're on the road in 4 out of their last 6 weeks to finish the season. Great for weather for people attending these games, but not so great for home field advantage at the end of the year. How do you kind of digest the road stretches, home stretches, how that's all placed on the schedule?
Yeah, I kind of look at this a little differently than you're looking at it, Maddie. Because if you count the London game as a road game, even though it's a Bills home game,
right.
Buffalo alternates home and road games for the first 10 weeks of the season. So to me, that should allow them to not get too worn out, back-to-back roadies or something like that. My only concern is their 3 longest road trips in terms of air miles, outside of London, of course, all come at the end of the season. Week 14 to Kansas City, Week 16 to L.A., Week 18 to Miami. Those are their 3 longest road trips, and they're at the end of the year. If you got a beat-up team and now you're adding air miles, that could be a little bit daunting and kind of tip the scales in some of those matchups at the end of the season when bodies start to get really worn down.
Again, with the schedule, with how it's placed, the away games, I kind of look at the Jacksonville Jaguars game as an away game for this team. Yeah. But even so, you don't get back-to-back away games.
Yeah, they alternate the first 10 weeks. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
I think is nice for this team. You do have a 3-game home stretch there in October. I think those are going to be or not 3-game home stretch because of the Jacksonville Jaguars. You get a bunch of games, though, at home in October for this team. So I think those will be some good weather games. Personally, it's hard to get people to come out to games in December. I'm sure you've experienced this as well. And we've seen it with the crowd as well at Bills games. It's tougher to pack the stadium in cold weather December, January games. Yes, Bills Mafia shows up, but the atmosphere, I think, is really enjoyable when you have that fall weather, and you're seeing that reflected with the schedule. Overall, is there anything else that we haven't pointed out here that stick out to you with the schedule?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's pretty cut and dry. I mean, we know when it's tough. We like that it alternates between home and away. And again, those 3 long trips at the end could be a challenge at the end of the year, and that Dolphins game is going to be a biggie at the end. I just have a feeling.
Yeah, it definitely will. Well, speaking of biggies, we decided to come up with our top 5 games of the Bills' 2023 schedule. So we'll alternate here. You can kick us off. What is number 1 on our list? We're not going in our favorite to our least favorite. We're just going in order of how the schedule is laid out. So,
Yeah.
so number 1 was week 1, Chris.
Yeah, Bills at Jets on Monday Night Football, and I know how New York fans can be when they think their team is good. A fast start by the Bills, and they can get those same fans to turn on their own team. So hopefully that is the case, because that's a tough atmosphere in Week 1 with all the all the expectations of Rodgers and the Jets.
Yep. So number 2 for us was week 9. It's the Sunday night football game against the Bengals. There could be some playoff implications here by week 9. You're getting to the later part of the season, really middle of the season now that the season is 18 weeks long. But November is time when you're starting to look forward, starting to hunker down for the playoffs, really figure out what type of team you are. There's a lot of history between these two teams. As we know, they're going to Cincinnati, where Damar Hamlin had his episode on the field. So there's going to be some emotion in that game. Like you said, Chris, I do like that it's at week 9 rather than week 2 or 3. You've got Joe Burrow, you've got Josh Allen, Jamar Chase, and Stephon Diggs. It's a star-studded lineup between two teams who could very well make it all the way. These are Super Bowl contending teams, and it'll be interesting to see what type of level they're playing at come week 9. All right, number 3 on our list. What is it?
Yeah, week 12, Bills at Eagles, the 425 game. And the first time Sean McDermott will be back in his native Philadelphia as a head coach in this league. I think that's a pretty cool full circle moment for him. You have to believe his players are going to be really wanting to get a win for him in that one, but that is a rough defense, a stacked defense for Philadelphia. It's going to be a challenge for Josh Allen and company, and obviously Jalen Hurts in that run game is going to be a challenge as well. So it'll be very interesting to see how that thing plays out. It might be more of a rock'em sock'em football type of game if Philly can grab hold of it and kind of dictate how the play unfolds.
We say it starts in the trenches. The Eagles have a great offensive line and defensive line. Oh, my gosh. Number 4 on our list, Week 14, Bills at the Kansas City Chiefs. And they just live in Kansas City when they play this team. It seems like every single year they're back in Kansas City to play the Chiefs. It's a 425 kick. In order to be the best, you have to beat the best. They're the former Super Bowl champions. The Bills beat them last year in the regular season, but they haven't gotten the best of them in the playoffs yet. We'll see how they can take on this team in the regular season, but is this going to be a team that you're going to have to play a second time when the playoffs come around? So it's a premier matchup that we all look up to and look to every single year. Love that it comes later in the season. Hopefully the Bills are healthy for this one. Number 5, what is it?
Yeah, it's what we've talked about already, the Week 18 game. Bills at Dolphins to end the season, which is a TBD. As we heard Mike North say, it could be slotted anywhere based on how tight the division and conference races are. I think we all anticipate a lot will be on the line here with the division possibly in play as well as playoff seeding. Big question here is, how tight are these games this year with the Bills and the Dolphins? All 3 of them were tight last year, including the playoff game, which was decided by 3, the game up here decided by 3, and the game down there decided by 2 points. They were all nip and tuck games. Do they take on the same complexion this time? And maybe more importantly, is Tua Tagovailoa healthy for this game at the end of the season? He did not finish last season, as we know, on the field. He finished it on the sidelines. What happens this year?
Brownie, before we close out here, big picture with this schedule, you said it in the beginning, we are facing several playoff contending teams from last season and could be the same this season. The strength of schedule, again, that this team has to play against the former Super Bowl champion, the team that played against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. You look at the schedule, and we were going to pick an under-the-radar tough game, but there were no under-the-radar tough games because there's tough game against tough game and then tough game and tough game. It's tough sledding, going to be tough sledding for this team, and it'll be interesting to see if they are up for the fight all year long.
I think they are, and I think they're battle-tested from all the adversity they experienced last year. Hopefully they don't have to go through nearly as much from that perspective, and I think it hardened them and made them stronger for this year coming up, and I think they know that a lot of things got in the way of their goals last year. I think even if some of those hurdles present themselves this year, they'll be prepared to clear them based on what they experienced in 2022.
I think every year we look back and we say, okay, this team has been there, they've done that, they've now experienced this, check it off, because the next time they're in a position like this, they're going to be even more ready, whether that's the playoffs, whether that's a game like they had against the Bengals with Damar Hamlin. All of these things that you could never guess would happen, did happen for this team last year. And we've talked to Josh Allen already, and he's said, I've never been so focused for a season. I have learned from this past season. I am very motivated as we head into preparing for the 2023 season. This is a veteran team. They have experience together. They have chemistry together. We'll see how some of these rookies can fold into the mix as well.
No question about it, and I'm looking forward to the opener already.
All right, week one. Come on. All right, the Bills are giving away 2 tickets to the 2023 home opener. You can enter today at buffalobills.com/home opener for a chance to win. The contest runs now until May 16th. We want to thank you guys for tuning into our instant reaction of the Bills 2023 schedule presented by Ellicott Development and Alof at 500 Pearl. For Chris Brown, I'm Maddy Glab. Head to BuffaloBills.com and buy those tickets today.